Dzień dobry, dzieci. It's the Flurza experience. This is episode number 21. That's a full blackjack there. You wrote this one. You put this little script together. So there's no name for you, and
There's no name.
I didn't come up with one.
Good. We're fully grown.
We are
21. That's the number I was going for when we started.
If we were all Squirtles, we are now War Turtles. And
yes.
Is episode 100 when we hit Blastoise status?
I hope so.
Okay.
Although I'm more of a Charizard type of guy. But
are you?
Yeah.
I've always liked the water Pokemon best. I mean, that's just me. Or because they're very related to the ice Pokemon, and I like the ice stuff very much.
The ice ones are really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where we're at. We're at episode 21. The topic today is going to be deck building strategies and deck building tools, mainly just to sort of improve how you get there. Because it's not just about, net decking is part of it, but net decking is only one little aspect of it. And I think we've spoken about net decking a little bit, but
we did.
Yeah. But we're going to talk about how to build a deck a little bit, and that's it. But how was your week? And part of this is because I know how your week was, because you, like a psychopath. Yeah, you're a psychopath. You went to the city of Gdańsk, which is, it's not that far. It's like a 4-hour drive, but you didn't drive.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a funny story because a week prior to my trip to Gdańsk, on last Saturday, my friend hit me up. Or he just posted on Instagram that he's getting some people together because he wants to bike to Gdańsk. And I'm like, yeah, totally. I know a lot of friends who bike there. It's like a standard destination from Warsaw to Gdańsk, or from Warsaw to the seaside and then to Gdańsk, because from Gdańsk it's much easier to take a train back to Warsaw. And we're like, yeah, let's do it. I haven't put a challenge in front of myself for quite some time. And I wanted to do something new, something different. So yeah, I didn't really prepare for it. The only thing I did is I bought a proper bag to put in the back of my bike, so where I can actually pack some clothes to change, spare parts if I need them, and kind of, things to fix the bike on the go, and lots of food, of course. And I learned that 2 more friends are coming, so there was supposed to be the 4 of us. And my packing bag came on Friday, so just before we left for the trip. So I just packed it up very nicely, quickly, put the bike all together, pumped the tires, check if everything is fine, and we're gonna go. And my friend texted me saying that, by the way, I won't be able to go because I have something with my Achilles tendon and my foot got swollen. I can't go.
Oh, that sounds like an excuse to me.
No, he sent photos and it looked bad. It looked like, like a watermelon ankle, pretty much. So
he's a Photoshop artist too. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh man, and I wrote to the 2 other guys, which I never met in my life. By the way, are we doing this? And they're like, yeah, we're doing this. I'm like, oh, cool. I'll meet you at 3 a.m. in the morning on Saturday, and let's do it. And yeah, we met up, and it was funny because I went to get from my place there, and we met in the center. You need to go through next to the Vistula River, and now it's a place where a lot of people party. So I was just trying to swerve through drunken people, trying to get home, and puking everywhere. And we met up, and I'm like, hi, my name is Pavel. That guy's like, hey, my name is Pavel. I'm Patrick. I'm like, yeah, nice to meet you guys. So what, we're going, and we went. And yeah, long story short, to the place that we wanted to get, so to the seaside, to eat some nice fried fish with chips.
From Blue Jeans?
Not from Blue Jeans. Not from. I'll get to Blue Jeans later. So it was 330 kilometers. So we went. It was pretty much nonstop. We only stopped every 50 kilometers at a gas station to fill up on water and food. And yeah, it was just a lot of candy bars eaten and non-alcoholic beers drank in order to get to the seaside. We got to the seaside, we ate the fish, we drank some beers, and then we went to Gdańsk, 33 kilometers more. So it was 360 kilometers in total for the whole trip, which was really fun.
Oh, really? Was it?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a you thing. That's
It's
definitely not a
funny.
me thing.
It's funny because we had like a lot of wind coming in from the side. There wasn't a lot of headwind, so pretty much it was an easy, even cruise. The last kilometers were the toughest ones. Everything above 300, you feel like you're depleted, and then whenever you eat something, you get like a burst of energy. Like sugar goes up, and then it just goes down, and you need to do it all over again. So it's like up and down, up and down. But yeah, we got there. We got some proper food in us. And then the last leg of 30 kilometers to Gdańsk was just like easy peasy, felt fresh. And then I only had like a train ticket back, but they had their train on the same day. Mine was next day in the morning. So I got a hotel. I pretty much ate something and I fell asleep. Although I wanted to go to Blue Jeans, but I looked, it was like 4.5 kilometers away. I'm like, nope,
You
sorry,
just
Blue
did
Jeans.
360 and you're like 4.5
No,
kilometers is too
I'm
long.
like, no, we'll have to wait for Flake to come to Poland, and then we go together. Otherwise, no freaking way. Because the train is like 3 hours, or sometimes less if you take the fast one, and it's not very expensive. So we can just take whenever you're here. We'll just take a trip to Blue Jeans and back.
So this is exactly because when I had mentioned this to my mom and I was like, I'm like, oh, do you remember Pavel? And she's like, of course. And I said, well, he went to Gdańsk. And she's like, oh, that's very nice. And I'm like, yeah, he biked there. And she's like, what? Is he crazy? That's not her voice, and I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, and what's funny is I'm like, I think I might be going back to Poland soon, hopefully I want to go visit Pavel. And I'm like, I think we're going to go to Gdańsk. And she's like, you're not biking there, are you? I said, yeah. I'm like, why not? He could do it. It's easy. She's like, Matthew, you just got out of the hospital. What are you going to do? You can't. I'm like, I got out 2 years ago. I'm fine. I'm like, I'm good. Let's do this. And she's like, oh my God. When did you go? Where do you go? On the roads? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the roads, but you omit the ones that have heavy traffic. So you kind of take my parents call it the old route before we had like the highways actually getting there, because now we have like a fast highway that goes straight to Gdańsk, but you can still omit and go through the more scenic routes and stuff like that. But yeah, it was beautiful, especially that we started very early in the morning. It took us almost 11 hours just to get to the seaside, which is pretty good, with an average of 30 kilometers per hour, like non-stop almost, which is pretty good. I to be honest, I wasn't expecting us to be that good, but the guys were saying that if I wasn't there, that would be probably like 2 hours later, because I was kind of like pushing them to go faster a little bit. Yeah, I just felt good. It was one of those days that you feel good, you feel almost invincible, and you just push for it, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's it's like sometimes the elevator takes too long. I just take the stairs,
Exactly.
three flights, and I'm like that. I'm like, fuck yeah. I'm like, that's exactly like what Pavel did.
Exactly.
It's the exact same thing, same workout. Yeah, I don't know how you do it.
Just a lot of calories burned and a lot of candy bars in.
When Arya came to visit and we went rock climbing, I did
Mhm.
like one wall and I was like dead, and she's like upside down hanging, and she's like, "What are you doing? Come on, let's go!" I'm like, "Dear God!" She was like a Pokemon, like just
Aw.
climbing walls and just like, "Come on,
It's
let's
just
go,
it's just
Arya,
practice.
Arya."
It's just practice. If you do something a lot, for like I've been cycling consecutively for the last, I don't know, 3 to 4 years, like nonstop. And since I'm doing that, and I was also last 2 weeks, I was also working out in the gym a little bit to kind of, work on also some like strength related stuff. So my back doesn't ache and I don't feel like I'm broken after the whole trip. I feel like that helped a lot because, yeah, it just let me get there without any problems. And now after it, I'm kind of thinking about what to do next in terms of like something that is going to be epic.
You can go through the like polar ice caps and bike your way over to Canada if you want.
That would be interesting to
No,
do
but you'd
though.
have to like dog sled at some point, go through
Yeah,
like the North Pole. Yeah,
I don't think they made tires good enough for that
not
just
yet.
yet.
Well, they
No.
probably have them here in Canada. We're not.
Mm,
We're not wussies. So,
of, of course not.
all right. Deck building and deck building strategies, ladies and
Yep.
gentlemen. Let's get back to the CCG portion of the program. We had our little chats, but Pavel, deck building And deck building strategies is what's on the docket here. And again, the first thing that we kind of want to probably brush aside is that, yes, net decking is a thing. There's nothing wrong with it. We've spoken about this at length in previous episodes. So it's very easy to go out there and just lift the list that is tried, tested, and true. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that because, hey, why reinvent the wheel when there's something out there? But what we want to talk about, I think, is how to make something from scratch, or how to take something, perhaps the shell of something that exists, and how to customize it and improve it so that you see success. Now, there's building decks for tournaments, which is its own beast, and there's building decks for ladder grind. And ladder grind is something I think that's really exclusive to digital clients and such like that. So we'll probably have the lion's share of the discussion be about that. But for you, Pavel, I know for myself, I'm not a good deck builder. I've never claimed to be. I'm not. The way that I've sort of argued it is that, there are, I think I've said this on the podcast before, is that there are way more pilots than there are aeronautical engineers. There's way more people who fly the planes than there are who design them. So it's very similar to deck building because, anybody can kind of fold a piece of paper together, make a paper airplane and throw it and it'll fly for 20 yards. But that's not going to get you anywhere. You need an actual thing. So are you a deck builder, Pavel? I'm not.
I'm really not, to be honest. I'm actually, which a lot of people listening will gasp. I enjoy net decking a lot, but to a certain extent. I don't feel like net decking is the only thing that I do, because I like to just check out cards in my collection sometimes, and if I feel like there's a card that I like and that I can build something around, I try to build something around it. Of course, this is not going to be something which is good, which is very competitive, but it's going to be fun to play for sure. And I go through a process of trying to streamline the deck a little bit, make it better. But I feel like in both digital and physical, I kind of know which cards are good, which cards are bad based off of what's being played in a given meta. So sometimes if it's Gwent, it's just a couple things that are getting changed. Like you got to fit in the Pavko Gale to your deck if you're playing Squirtle, for example, even if he's not good at the moment. But just do it for bragging rights. But sometimes also like adding cards that I feel like will change the deck a little bit. But I don't feel like I'm reinventing something from scratch. I'm just adding more of a personal touch to the whole thing. I feel like now with the possibility of mixing, both elves and dwarves a little bit, and having also like different versions of a hand buff deck in this meta, lets you kind of play around with that stuff. So that's what I like to do. Just drop in a couple cards which I feel like, work for me and my play style. As for Magic, I just go from like, I know that I want to play this card, or I see a new card being revealed, and I'm like, okay, I want to build around it, or I want to add it to my existing deck and test it. And based on a couple matches played or a couple FNMs that I go to played, I kind of know if it works for me or not. But I never reinvent the wheel from scratch, saying like, I am now gonna create the meta breaker deck, 10 out of 10 wins, all that stuff.
Yeah, my favorite term in all of card game is meta breaker.
Exactly.
Like, all right. Give your ego a rest there, buddy.
Yeah.
You went 3-0 on day one. There is no meta to break.
Yeah. Testing pool, 3 matches out of 3.
Yeah,
3-1.
100% win rate. Rank 18 to 17 in 6 minutes. Off 3 disconnects. It was the best day of my life.
Amen.
So yeah, exactly. A lot of it has to do with there's the tweaking aspect, and there's no shame in not being the architect who built something from scratch. But typically, like you mentioned, there are certain cards that kind of grasp your attention, especially when new cards are revealed. There are cards that enhance existing decks, like we've seen it in the past, where let's say, for example, in Flesh and Blood, if a card comes out, a new set came out where there's a lot more ice cards, talented cards. And that supports previous expansions that had ice heroes. So a lot of people see cards and say, wow, this would go really well in a Lexi deck or an Oldhim deck. Or there are cards that come out where people see them and say, this is a build-around card. This is the thematic anchor to what I'm trying to make. And an example for that might be, in Magic has a lot of alternate win condition cards. Approach of the Second Sun, for example, was one all the way back in Amonkhet. These are build around cards. Scenarios in Gwent are build around cards. Those are kind of the framework that you go, and building around those are fine. And I think the strategy that people need, and again, we're going to give you strategies based on how to build successful decks. Successful meaning that can win games relatively consistently at least a 40 to 50% clip, building decks that obviously provide you with a fun experience is important too. But fun is relatively subjective, so we're not going to dig too deep into that, I think. But I think when you're building a deck, Pavel, the most important thing that you need to do is you need to focus more so on your own deck. And a lot of people will be like, well, what if, what do I include this to beat this? Do I include this to beat this? I think that 90% of any deck needs to be self-sustaining and needs to be self-validating in that respect. You can't build a deck too worried about your opponent's strategies. So the deck building process in my eyes has always been, if there's a 60-card deck, all 60 cards are going to support my strategy. As I play it, I eventually figure out what cards are weakest or least integral to executing my strategy. And then from that point onward, if I have a 60-card deck and I say, well, you know what, these 10 cards perform the least or were least relevant to attaining my goal, let's now cut these, put in neutral related or non-specific cards, see how the deck functions there, and then those 10 neutral cards can then be swapped for counter cards or counter strategy cards that are meant to, dunk on my opponent or be very high risk, high reward in certain cases. But for the most part, I want my deck building strategy to be very self-sufficient out of the gate, and then I start worrying about everything else.
Yeah. I have the similar approach. Whenever I'm building something, I focus mainly on, especially if it's a deck that is not very, let's say, prevalent or played. I have this especially in Magic. Like, there are decks that I don't see like in Modern being played a lot. Like, they used to be played, but now they kind of have fallen off. But I still like to play them because I like the core cards of the deck. And yeah, I pretty much build it in a sense that I first ask my question, like, what is the purpose of this deck? Like, what do I win with? So my win condition is this, or if it's Gwent, then my engines are these. How do I use them? Okay. So in order to support them, I need this and this and that. The Magic is like, okay, in order to win, I need this. But also in Magic, I feel like I spend more time thinking about the mana base because it's very crucial. And sometimes, one land can make all the world of a difference of how the deck shuffles up and what you draw into and how it plays. I actually have a tendency of adding too many instead of lessening up, and then I would just be starting to cut the amount of lands that I have. I also think about the mana curve. So how many 1 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost, 4 cost, blah 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 cards that I have, and seeing how it curves out, and based off of that, I'm kind of able to anticipate how to structure the mana base around it. But yeah, I think for like the initial stage of deck building, I think about how am I going to win the game, and I try to put in as many cards that will give me the W or will support the W. And then I also get into, like, you sometimes get into this mistake when you have too many cards that are just about like win, 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 and your deck starts to become very uninteractive. So then you need to start adding interactive cards. And for me, interactive cards are cards like removal, cards that boost, cards that protect, for example, give hexproof, give any type of thing to keep your stuff on the board. Yeah, I feel like removal is also very important here because you sometimes see threats being played by your opponent, and you need to be interacting with those threats as soon as possible until they get out of hand and kind of ruin your game plan. So depending on what your deck is, you're either trying to protect stuff or you're trying to get rid of stuff which is problematic for you. Or if you're a control deck, you focus on mainly controlling the board, wiping the board, and then restarting the game, and pretty much bleeding your opponent for as many resources as possible, as quick as you can, in order to try to get them into a more or less lock state where you're able to, always counter, always destroy, and then play your win con and try to win the game with that. So that's kind of how I do it. But yeah, I agree with you. You need to focus on your game plan first, and then think about what you want to do moving forward. Like, do I need more interactive stuff? Do I need graveyard hate? Do I need royal decrees or neuromancy, for example? Do I need things that will tutor for specific cards that I need? Or if I don't need that because I have like a couple copies of a win condition and I'm able to get to these, there's like many things that go into this. But first, I just focus on the main plan for the deck.
Yeah, that's an important element. Is of course, like you don't know, you can't build a house without a good foundation, and the foundation is obviously going to be your own winning conditions and your own strategies. And I would also typically suggest like a very very novice deck builders should probably not build decks that are based on control elements. I think that's oftentimes difficult, because I find that control decks often need to understand their opponent's win conditions and their opponent's game plans the best. Different win conditions means that you need to that you're facing needs different strategies of control to how to counter them. Do you hold a counter spell? Do you hold a kill card, like to kill a specific planeswalker or creature or whatnot? These are very important things. The heat wave. When do you hold your heat wave? For Keltulis, for the defender, for a scenario? What do you hold the heat wave for? So these are very important elements. So building a deck that's surrounded exclusively around control needs a much more deeper understanding of your opponent's win condition than your own, because your win condition is making sure that they run out of threats, and then your little threats can eventually pump through. But like the best, another piece of advice that I would probably give to people is understanding when a card is integral and important to a game strategy, and when a card is win more. A win more card is a very high, it's kind of like a situation where it is mostly effective when you're already in a favorable game state. So, for example, cards that say things like, this is a hypothetical card, but if there was a card that said, like, if you're, boost self by 20 if you're winning by 20, that is a win more card. You're already ahead by 20, so what's the difference of paying provisions to get that much more ahead when that card that you're playing is probably better used for something else? So those are win more cards, and having the fine-tuned, instinct to determine when a card is win more and when a card is just really good is important to the deck building process, because that's where you can kind of weed out these win more cards, and those are the cards that you want to eventually swap for counter strategy cards, for more removal, or for purification if it's Gwent, for counter spells if it's magic, for defense reactions if it's flesh and blood. Those are the kinds of cards that you need to identify.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also going back to what you mentioned, if someone is really eager to play control, I would wait until you actually know when you where you're playing control, because in order to play control, you really need to know the meta super well. I feel like to play control, you need to know the game much better than the player that is trying to carry out his or her win condition. I feel like, of course, you need to know what you're playing against, because that's what it starts with. But control needs to know kind of what Flake said, when to counter, when to interact, when to wait, before you do, I don't know, let's say a wrath, where you pretty much destroy everything that your opponent has. Or, same thing goes, what do you banish out of the graveyard, or what do you use the heat wave on? Those were good examples. And then, I fully agree with you that moving forward, you will be kind of fine-tuning things, because I feel like we all get into a situation where we have win more cards in our deck, and sometimes you feel like they're not really doing much for you. You're in a point where you have a good enough cushion, you should be pushing for the win. And this sometimes the win more cards are not really helping you, where you're supposed to be at a time doing something different within the game plan. If you should be like closing the game, if you should be already, but sometimes sometimes the win more like get additional life, or things that prolong the game in some sense can help you, because they'll let you draw into things maybe later on, and you'll have the life cushion in order to carry out a couple more steps. And sometimes you get into a point in a game where you feel like it's over and that you're going to lose, but thanks to this cushion that you've built up, you're kind of able to move forward. But it doesn't always happen, and sometimes you just feel like you're just drawing into the win more cards. You just have all the win more, or the cards that carry out one thing, while you cannot do that one thing before, because you're pretty much, something that was important to your game plan was either removed, countered, destroyed, whatever, and then you're kind of stuck with cards that aren't really doing much for you. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that go into this. Like, it's also important to have cards that let you draw other cards, like let you filter through your deck, let you do any type of hand fixing and stuff like that. These are important, especially if you rely on a combo deck. If you're playing an aggro deck, you just want to slam as many creatures on the board and see if they stick. And if they stick, buff the hell out of them and destroy your opponent as quick as possible before they're able to carry out their game plan. But if you're playing aggro versus like control deck, you pretty much, you will get into a spot where they destroy, and you're just drawing, like, if it's Magic, you're one card per your turn, and whatever you're putting on the board just gets destroyed or countered, and you're stuck. And it's very hard to build back unless your opponent gets to a point where he or she is just like, well, I can't do anything anymore. I've used all my counters and I used all my destruction spells. But of course they haven't. They have a whole deck built around that. So you need to think about those things. And it's also important then, when carrying out your game plan, not to play all your creatures at the same time, because you might be anticipating that you're going to get all of them removed. And if you're, I get this tendency when I'm doing well within, I play Arena from time to time, and I have this mono white deck that is just creatures, and they rely on getting as many as possible. And there's this one creature that's, its power is equal to the number of creatures that you have. So you're trying to, ramp it up, get as many as possible. And then your opponent plays like Bloodhook Massacre and then destroys your whole board. And you're like, well, there goes my game plan. I have one card in hand, which is like a boost spell. And what am I going to boost? Because I have nothing on the board, right? So you need to think about these things too.
Yeah, you're playing that risky gambit of just kind of, it's called overcommitting. This isn't, it's a concept that's basically, it fits for so many different games. Partially, I mean, overcommitting in Magic is like, there's like you mentioned, putting everything on the board when you're already way ahead, and just dying to something like, any type of Wrath effect, a Cleansing Nova, a Wrath of God, or whatever, just any kind of board wipe. Also, when I got into the game, my overcommitting was, all right, my opponent has like almost no. I'm gonna see if you can pick up what I'm leading to. Nothing on the board. You have like 8 creatures, but they have 4 mana open, and 2 of it is white. And you're like, do I swing with everything? What do I swing with? And then you end up swinging with like 3 creatures, like 1 good one and like 2 bad ones. And people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, do you know what I'm leading to? You know the card that you're worried about?
Are you talking about a recent card or something?
Well, in the past like 5 years, 4 years.
Ooh, then I don't know what you're talking about.
Settle the Wreckage? Come on.
Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like those whole things where they're like, they just like don't block. And you're like, and they just look at you with 4 open mana, and you're like, God damn it. So that is another element of overcommitting, is that in Gwent, it's like, you're ahead by like 30 points. You're in round 1, and you keep putting down huge cards to stay ahead. Yep, that's overcommitting as well.
Guilty.
Oh my God! Like my favorite part about sometimes like playing in Gwent against novice players was that they would just really try to buy the farm with all the gold cards, and I would just give them these like small little, and I'm like, they are so horny to win this round. I'm gonna dump all my trash because they keep giving me their good cards. And I would just be like, you just push your luck a little bit. I'm like, all right, here's another 5 provision bronze, here's another 4 provision bronze, and they're like 9 provision card, 10 provision card. I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, once all my bad cards are out of my hand, it's like, all right, you win the round. We go to round 2, they pass, and then I have all my good cards for round 3. And then it goes from there. That's another element of overcommitting. In Hearthstone, you fill up a board against Warrior and then they brawl you and you're like, damn it, that's overcommitting. So that is akin very much to like the win more in terms of deck building, of putting those cards in there that are important. But once you get past that, once you've identified your own deck strategy, what is integral to it, what the win conditions are, and then you start looking at the meta. And that's where those 10 spots of, those 10 spots of sort of cards that can come in and out, or in Magic, that's where you build your 15 card sideboard. That's where those elements come in. But that is best done with a very keen understanding of the meta. Deck building is not just about putting cards into a deck and going and showing up, because when you're constructing your deck, understanding the meta is so important. It's like that aeronautical engineer analogy. The aeronautical engineer, it's not just about understanding how to put the nuts and bolts together. It's an understanding the way that the winds work, the way like your aerodynamics, lift, thrust, all that stuff. You need to understand everything surrounding it, the climate. And that's the same thing of like the meta, where if you need to understand, building a plane that's meant to fly, 75,000 feet in the air, like an SR-71, or a Boeing A320 that's like 30,000 feet. Like, they're built differently. A space shuttle needs different, but you have to understand the climate and what you're building for. So that sideboard, those 10 sort of flex spots in a deck, you can use those to disrupt strategies. If you have a firm grasp of what the meta is, that's where you decide, do I need more tall removal? Or do I slap in a Lacerate, or do I slap in a Geralt Pro? Do I slap in a Purify, or do I slap in something that does a lot of random damage? Or do I need more 4 provision smash cards and stuff like that? That's the understanding, because that 4 provision slot, those in my estimation, I always feel like there's typically one card that's like 10 provision or greater, one card that's in like the 6 to 9 range, and then about 1 or 2 cards in the 4 provision to 5 provision slots that are your flex spots, that are your key disruption. That's where like Squirrel fits. That's where Purification fits. And at the top end, that's where things like a Geralt might fit, like an Earden or an Igni or an Axie. And in the middle slots, that's where you have more Purify, like something like Kurt with a Bounty Giver. That's where you have, maybe another big removal spell, another lock, things like that. Those are the key elements, but you need an understanding of what the meta looks like so that you can determine, in this 4 provision spot, do I need Graveyard Hate, or do I need Purification? Do I need more direct damage, or do I need more boost? And that's the key element of deck building, is a firm grasp of what the meta looks like.
Yeah, it's very situational, and you kind of like, once you have the base down, you start tweaking and testing, and that's kind of where you find. I also sometimes feel that there are decks that work for specific people based on the rank that they are. Same goes for in Magic, the decks that play at a certain meta game, or like they're different than the decks that I would bring, for example, to my local shop, right? Because I know that the meta there is a little bit different. People bring different stuff than what is currently on top, like in Magic Online, for example, right? Same goes for like Arena. It's different stuff is being played there that I would see being played in Standard in the shop that I have. And same goes for Gwent. Depending on which rank you are, people are playing different decks, and you kind of are able to anticipate what you might queue into. And it's funny because with Gwent, you can sometimes even pinpoint specific times of the day where people queue in and the type of decks that they normally bring. which is funny because I feel like the people that play midday, there's a lot of mill always if you're not in pro rank. But if you're in pro rank, the field might look totally different and you need to be prepared for that. So I feel like with the climb even that you're doing, you might be tweaking stuff in between the ranks that you are. The higher you are, I feel like the more variety you'll get, especially if you're in pro rank, because I think this is something that Flake kind of agreed on in one of the previous episodes, is the fact that people up to pro rank play like crazy clutch stuff that gets them there, and once they're there, they start testing other stuff out. They start playing around with different decks because they're not, there's nothing to lose there. They're already in pro rank, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. And again, understanding the meta is also in terms of where you are. The weather at the bottom of the mountain isn't the same as the weather at the top of the mountain, and so you got to prepare for that as well. So that's the other part is the deck building process is you need to be flexible, and you need to understand that what worked yesterday will not necessarily work today. What worked at rank 18 will not necessarily work at rank 10, won't work at rank 5, won't work at pro. So that busting out of your stubbornness is incredibly important, and being humble about the experience. You have to expect that if you're building a deck that it's going to lose more likely than it will win early on as you're just getting your footing. The deck building process, and part of why I'm not a big deck builder is because I try to avoid it because it's an incredibly harrowing experience, and it's not good for your mental health if your whole life was Gwent, which mine was, and you're building decks and you're trying to be creative, and all you're doing is getting absolutely just decimated.
Pulverized.
Yeah, pulverized. Absolutely decimated at every... It's very tough for your psyche to bust through it. That's why I like the fact that there's so few people that really make good creative decks. It's because the process is so harrowing and difficult. So kudos to those people. Again, not easy to do. So for myself, going through this process, you need to sort of abandon any kind of stubbornness that because yesterday's success is not today's success, and you need to continue to understand because your 8-1 streak yesterday, it's a fresh meta. People change, and that deck that you're successful with, people may have adapted to. And if you're not evolving, you're dying. You're being left out. And those 10 flex slots are there to future-proof yourself to a degree. A good deck should not have 60 cards of dedicated juice in order for it to function or have a chance. It needs half of that to work properly. It's like 30 core cards to get you there, another 15 or so to support it, and another 10 to 15 to be meta dependent. And that's kind of how it goes. So you need to be ready to swallow your pride and say, it worked yesterday, it doesn't work today, so why isn't it working today? One of those things like, wow, everybody's freaking playing Irden today. What the hell's going on? Well, everybody's playing Irden today because the decks that you were playing were exploiting the fact that people are not playing Irden. When Dwarf meta came back a couple months ago, I was packing Irden and everyone's like, well, just run Lacerates, it's cheaper. Or I can run Irden and win the game. Like, it's the same thing. There's that flex spot in the 10+ provision space that wins games. That's what they're there for. They're there for that particular thing, because Irden on its own is not gonna win you a game. It's meta dependent, and that's why those are great cards to have in your deck. But being able to detach yourself from your deck and not identifying directly with it, it's not you. The fact that you're making changes isn't a sign of failure. It's actually a sign of success, that you recognize that it needs tweaking and that you're going to make those tweaks. So that's why the deck building process is so important, because you need to have that latitude, that leeway, those margins where you can turn the dials one way or another and adjust it. So good deck building means a core idea is not a 60 card idea, it's a 30 card idea. And go like in Gwent, let's say, a good strategy, a reliable good deck is not going to take all 25 card spots. It's going to take 20 of them, and then you'll have 5 that you can play around with or adjust. It's going to take 18 to 20 to really function, and everything else is counter meta, and that's how a successful deck can operate.
I feel like it's even harder in Gwen because there's no sideboard options. So your deck, your initial deck, in which you'll be playing with, needs to consist of things that have the possibility to answer multiple things. Which I feel like, because sometimes you might have that Iriden, but it's just a brick. It's not giving you anything, and you run into these situations. But I mean, sometimes you can still salvage a game with that if your game plan is strong enough. But sometimes this card just wins you the game on the spot, right? Or any type of removal that might counter your opponent's play. It's just there, and it will win you the whole thing. But you need to have it in your main deck. So I feel like in Gwent you even need to be playing with your deck a lot more in terms of checking cards, like putting them in, taking them out, seeing if they work for you. Also being patient and testing it thoroughly instead of doing like 1-3 games, 100% win rate, and it doesn't work that way. Like you need a bigger sample size. In Magic, I feel like it's easier because you have the sideboard, and the sideboard is a lot of times based off of mainly what you want to do after game one. So you already know what your opponent is playing and what you want to bring in terms of like pure hate for your opponent's
Yeah.
deck. And because your initial deck is just trying to get you down the line in order to get the win and carry out your your game plan in this sense. But I feel like sometimes in some decks you might delay even your game plan or your win con by a couple turns, which will still, in this case, like you will get there, but you will fill in, you will add some cards which let you stabilize the game, for example, or will stop your opponent from doing something, or will let you or will give you actually time for you to build yourself up. And it's Magic. It's funny because, like you said, like you just keep mana open, and sometimes it's just a psychological play. Like, do I have the counter spell or I don't? I have 2 blue open, right? I might have it, right? Or I don't have it, right? So sometimes people just leave it there. And as card game players, we like the risk factor of this. So I always do this. I just play the card and I'm like, well, does it resolve? And most of the time it's like, well, I kept these open for something, but a lot of times it's like, well, you cut the bluff, right? I was bluffing. I have nothing.
But that's part of it, and that's the beauty of it. Like, there's no scarier situation in Magic than like, trying to do something. Like when your opponent when your opponent keeps blue mana open, you're like, oh, come on, like. Why all the time? That's usually how it goes. But you're right. It's like I like the whole aspect of calling them hate cards, which is what they are. There's hate drafting. Hate drafting's a thing. I hate drafted a couple weeks ago actually, which was in Flesh and Blood. I was playing Ninja. I was doing the Welcome to Wraith draft, and I had both of my flanks on Guardian. And I opened a pack, and the pack was a great freaking pack. It had Snapdragon Scalers, which is a very high-value piece of equipment to draft, especially for Ninja. It had Red Flick Flack, which is the best defense reaction in that particular set. And it had Crippling Crush, which is the Majestic Guardian 11 attack. Like, it's their bomb. And I'm like, oh my god. And I was like... I'm like, number one, I'm probably taking the Snapdragon Scalers in any other pack. That's a pack one, pick one in my regard, unless there's a bomb in it. But the bomb in this case was Guardian. I was not playing Guardian, I was playing Ninja, and it was already pack 3. There's no way I can pivot. And then there's Red Flick Flack. Defense reactions in limited are so important and so strong, and that was the strongest one. So I'm like, okay, take the busted equipment, take the best defense reaction, or take a card I can't play because F those 2 guys on my flanks. Yeah. So I absolutely hate drafted, and I took the Crippling Crush, and afterwards, my whole pool was like 99% ninja cards, and I and 2 hate drafts. One was
Yeah.
against Guardian and one was against
You
Warrior.
have to. In draft, you sometimes have to hate draft because you take a card because you don't want your opponent having that card, even if it doesn't fit in what you're building. Like you might have your colors, if it's Magic, you might have your colors already set, or you know what you want to do. Might be too late, but you're like, hell no, no one is getting this card, because if that person gets it, we're all gonna be screwed.
Basically, screw them. That was it. And so yeah, hate cards are important in the deck building process, and that's what we talk about. But those are all, again, those take a deep understanding of the meta. So this also ties into things about net decking and why, if net decking was such a crime, I think that net decking would be a lot more nasty if the players who net deck were successful. Like, I don't know how to properly convey this, but taking a strong deck does not guarantee success. It's like, sure, jump in a Ferrari, and you might beat me in a race on a straightaway, but give me a Honda Accord and driving skills, and I'll probably beat you on a course in a Honda Accord than an inexperienced person in a Ferrari. Will they win? In a Ferrari, there's a good chance because the engine is built better, the machine is built better. But without the experience, it's almost it's almost a 50-50 that they'll even be successful. A good now put that good pilot in the good machine, and that's when it's really but like there's
win-win.
That's win-win. So that's why it's important. Meta understanding is as integral to deck building as it is as putting certain cards in the deck. But the important thing, again, to sort of loop this back to the beginning, is novice deck builders need to have a self-sustaining strategy that is not dependent on what your opponent is playing. Engine pieces, symbiosis style decks in Gwent, mono red decks, which are very, you just point click and go pew pew. In Hearthstone, mage decks, I guess, or mech mage right now, and stuff like that. Like aggro pirate lists. Those are very self-sustaining. In Magic, we talked about creature related lists. So that's kind of how that goes. That's the basics. Is you need to have a win condition that relies on your own agency versus what your opponent is doing, and then you move on from there. So, I mean, if I were to give like a laundry list here, a little list of tips, like dot points, build a list that is self-sustaining, leave room for counter play and disruption for your opponent, understand the meta, and check your ego at the door. Yesterday's success is not today's success. You need to constantly be working and understanding. Success takes hard work, it takes dedication, and there's a reason why the players who are always on top of the ladder every season are there. It's because they're constantly understanding and keeping their toe in the river, as it were, to see which way the water's flowing, so they know which way to paddle and how to change their stuff. And those are key elements to successful deck building for sure.
Yeah, I sometimes also feel like one thing to add here is like you need to be always double checking and also trying. I feel like you always need to be tweaking stuff in the deck that you're playing. You might be set on a deck that you love and you've been playing for, I don't know, a long time. And I feel like whenever I feel comfortable with the deck and I'm playing it, and I feel like everything that I could have done with it is done, there is something always to do. And I feel like once I start playing around with it a little bit and changing stuff, that's where I get the most success, because you're testing new things, and some of them might be really cool that you haven't thought about or someone else hasn't thought about. The second thing is the element of surprise. I feel like with now us having access to so many decks online and play rates and win rates for certain like specific cards, especially when it comes to Magic, like we have MTG Goldfish, which has pretty much what's the percentage of people bringing this deck to any online thing, and what's the win rate. Like you can anticipate the win rates and stuff like that based on the popularity of the deck and all that. that we have access to all this, that a lot of people, when they're playing the game, they're just net decking straight away and they're not doing anything to the deck. So whenever you're playing against this, you're like, okay, I can see what the cards that are going to be played and the next couple turns are going to be. So you can kind of anticipate their game plan, which lets you tweak your game plan going against it. And, you know, when you bring something that they don't expect, they're like, what the hell is this card? I haven't seen this in X amount of time, or I haven't seen this in this deck. Like, you surprised me with this. And you get that after matches. If you're talking to someone, if they're in person, you're like, what the hell? Like, I wasn't expecting that. And that is kind of something that will let you give you the little edge. Even if you're playing a deck which, like, the majority of the cards, 90% of the cards might be the same stuff that other people are running. But let's say the 10%, or sometimes even the 5%, are those things that you draw into and people are like, what? This in this deck doesn't make sense. And then maybe sometimes you discover something that, you know, people will later on see and bring to this deck and use it, and you'll be like, yeah, that was my idea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My favorite parts about playing in tournaments sometimes is when you do the whole, it happens to me and I do it to people too sometimes. Again, when I'm in a Flesh and Blood tournament and the people that I test with, you know, they're like, hey, we included a pretty spicy tech. And it's like, all right, let's figure it out. And then you play test it, and then when the first time you bring it to a tournament, you jam that card down. One of them is like a card called Expose the Elements, which targets your opponent's equipment. And it either destroys it or makes it useless or whatever. And like the first time you bust out something like that, people are like, let me read this card. And like they do the whole, like, you play it, and I'm like, all right, I'll play Expose the Elements. I'll fuse it with Earth and Ice. So I'll put a counter on this equipment and then destroy it. And then they're like, let me see that. They read it. And I'm like, yeah. And then they're like, what the hell? And it's like, yeah. And you hit them with one of those. Those are the best when and that I find often happens much more frequently in Limited, because sometimes you're forced to play these weird, janky fringe cards. But in Constructed, you know, you jam a card that people haven't seen in a long time or are not familiar with, or something along those lines. You know, like for instance, I think it's like Dire Bear in Gwent, the one that doesn't allow you to boost on the opposite row. You know, like, that's a card that is very, very niche. It's very, but man, when that comes down, you're like, what the hell? And like, why aren't my dudes boosting? And you're like, oh, because of this. It's like, wow, that is a meta call. That is a brilliant play. If it's a very greedy engine-based deck, then you drop a Dire Bear to just block, like, back in the day when there used to be like Temerian Drummer next to a Tridem Infantry, next to like an Anna, next to a you know, you drop one of those bad boys, shuts all that nonsense down. Those are the moments that I love, and that's the kind of reward you get when you're very in tune with the meta, and your deck building takes into account meta and thus putting in proper tech cards. And that Dire Bear to me is a tech card. A card like Sucrus is not a tech card. I think a card like Sucrus is more of a support card because it supports a fringe strategy. But Dire Bear is purely counter. It's purely counter magic in that sense.
It's just hate.
It's hate. I say we love hate. We don't love hate. We love hate strategies. I don't know how to say that.
I mean, everybody likes that feeling, you know, when they're playing against someone where you also see it on digital clients where your opponent that is playing fast, he or she just pauses for a second after a play. You're like, yeah, you didn't see that coming, did you?
or you play a card and you see that the card gets highlighted.
They're reading it.
They're mouse scrolling over it to read it. That's the equivalent of, like, you know, when you play something and then they just like, can I read that? They're like, they're doing one of these, like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, okay. it's like, okay. No. It says basically it translates to you're effed. It translates to. Yeah. Because I saw your deck coming, and my sideboard accounted for that. That's what's so beautiful about. We should do an episode about sideboarding, because I think that is that is a great episode to do. All right, we're gonna save that conversation about sideboarding, because sideboarding is an art form, man. It's like jazz.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to rhyme. It doesn't have to do it isolated on its own. It is just a bunch of noises that do not coalesce. But in the grander scheme, you got to read between the lines. It fits in, and man, is it beautiful.
It's sometimes crazy what goes into sideboards, like what people bring to sideboards. Like when you look at the cards, you're like, none of these, like all of these are from like a different town and city or from a different continent. They like how are they supposed to work together? But then when you swap them in and add them to your deck, and I also feel like that the art of sideboarding, knowing what to take out and what to put in, is also very important, because I feel like a lot of players make a mistake here that they take out too many good stuff, like too much good stuff, and put in too much, let's say, tech, and then their game plan is kind of in shambles and their win condition is kind of, losing like its strength because of that. And sometimes you can kind of, you need to, like, once you know your deck like well enough, after you played it a lot, and I mean really a lot, you're at a point where you know which cards are the ones that are like musts that you always need to have them, and which cards are your flex slots. So they're flexible enough to be in your deck, but they're also flexible enough to be moving out of your deck for some other stuff just to come in. So sideboarding, yeah, I agree, is like, it's a whole other topic by its own.
I'm all for it. We can dig into that one next time. I think we got a hefty mailbag this week.
Yeah.
And yeah, our sponsor this week is the wonderful city of Gdańsk.
Yes. And Blue Jeans, which I didn't go to because it's 4.5 kilometers away from the hotel.
You were right there. You were right there.
No, and I was like, I'm so tired, and I already put my bike in the hotel room, and I'm like, no.
I want to come visit. I'm gonna come visit you. It's gonna happen this summer.
We're gonna go to Gdańsk.
We are gonna go to Gdańsk.
Train is cheap as dirt to get there.
Perfect. So. Hopefully, it doesn't look like that too.
No, it was a nice, comfy ride, to be honest. To go back, although I like the bike length there. It's just 11 versus 3 hours. It's almost the same thing, right?
Pardon me. Okay, I'm gonna. Yeah, I don't know what planet you're on where time is like that, but it's all good. That's like an episode. That's a interstellar kind of thing. All right, mailbag time. We'll be back with the mailbag.
All right, welcome back to the mailbag, where we answer your questions from Reddit and Twitter. And this time we have a couple of them. Starting off with TGG Gwent, I will pick a couple from these because there are questions like, where is Dagon and stuff like that.
Yeah, hold on.
Flake.
I forgot to mention. We forgot to mention this, actually. The topic of today's episode was actually suggested by Alias V, who is first of all, Alias V is going to be having a child soon. There's going to be, I don't know, I forgot what month specifically, but she's well on her way. And so I'm very excited for that, because even though she has not said anything or promised anything.
Uncle Flake!
Well, there's obviously an Uncle Flake situation. That is, come on. That's just who I am. But I believe that her intent is to name the child Matthew, whether, regardless of sex or gender.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. In fact, it's completely not true, because I just made it up. But the more I say it, the more it becomes reality, because as George Costanza said, it's not a lie if you believe it. So that's the strategy I'm going. So all right, that's all I wanted to just toss in there.
if you talk about something, it kind of gets in like subliminal or something, you call it, or maybe that's not that. Yeah,
I don't know if that's called the Mandela effect or something like that.
Yeah, it gets into your mind, although you're not fully aware of it, but someone repeating it, and then that's also how marketing works. So whenever you hear something multiple times, then like a commercial, you will remember it, and then when you go to the store, you're more incentivized to get that product. Anyway, shout out to Alias, because she's awesome.
One of our listeners is going to be in Gdańsk and be like, I should go to Blue Jeans. Why do I want to go to Blue Jeans? Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
That's how we go. Flurza 15, remember. And say that Mateus sent you from Canada.
Mateus from Canada, sent you, yeah.
Yeah, but ask for the manager. Don't talk to the,
No, they don't know. Ask for Zbyszek. Zbyszek is the owner.
Zbyszek.
Yeah.
Damn, I should have known that. Okay, but I didn't go. It doesn't matter. Okay, questions. So TGG Gwent, a lot of questions. I will skip the ones that are like, where's Dagon?
Premium
somewhere.
tokens when? Oh, they're hiring art people at CDPR. So go apply, get the job, and then go make the premium tokens and stop
That's
crying.
animation team. That's not art team.
That you make lateral move to the animation team. You got to get in somewhere. This is your way in.
Yeah. If we have animation open, that means premium tokens are closer than you think. So Dagon, let's skip that. When do you plan to add a new faction? Not this year for sure. Question about devotion, when there's going to be more devotion related stuff. I think Jean covered that in the previous developer video, so check that out. Balance, I'm not interested in. Other ways to spend scraps. Right now, we only did the journey for scraps things. This is something that we're testing, but we're thinking about other things to do. And I think the most important question out of all of these was if we'll ever introduce any type of punishment for players who, instead of pressing surrender when they know, or forfeit when they know that they're not going to win, they pull the internet cable cord, or they simply Alt F4 out of the game.
Yes, so I call that the mill win condition, which is yeeting your computer off a balcony after a player with 2 brain cells to rub together figure out how to beat you.
Yeah.
This is a fascinating one because this is a situation, and I say this when I used to stream, I used to say this all the time, that I have never played a card game in my life with more cowardly disconnections than Gwent. And that's not that's not an indictment on the Gwent community. It's an indictment on the people who can't just take a loss and hit the forfeit button. And I get it. People's connections are not always reliable. I mean, we've seen it, at these online tournaments that, like, Gwent Opens online, when you're connecting from all over the world, it's quite, it sometimes takes just one unstable element to the connection that can kind of throw things around. Usually it's stable, but I mean, it's when there's one card left and you're beating your opponent and suddenly they lose connection, like, let's get real. Like, that's basically just them having that kind of like cowardly move of just shutting down the game and disconnecting on purpose. The Alt F4ing is like one thing, but you could just escape enter and take the forfeit and save people's time. The way that I think that the reason I think that people do this is I think it's because they think they're sticking it to the person from the aspect of, well, now you got to sit through the disconnection screen for 20 seconds, and that's my FU to you. Okay, you have to reboot your whole computer after pulling the plug on it, and like, are you really?
Is it really worth it? Is it really worth it? Right.
I think that, like, it's hard to implement any kind of punishment to somebody who disconnects, because in that case, there's a lot of innocent people who do legitimately disconnect, that the punishment for them is that they are getting a loss that they otherwise would not have perhaps had, that they weren't disconnecting on purpose to prove a point. They disconnected in a game that maybe they were winning or maybe they were losing, and punishing that, the punishment in that regard is already the fact that they're taking the loss. So it's hard to punish innocent people for the crimes of the cowardly few who are too stubborn to just hit the escape button, that they think that it's less of a sting if their connection goes out, which I find absolutely hilarious. So my reply to that is I give them a GG, so when they do reconnect to the game, they get the notification that I donated 7 or 9 gold to them getting a better deck, and it's a nice reminder that, hey, I beat you last game and you wussed out, and Alt F4.
Remember about it.
Yeah, here you go. Here's a nice little pat on the back. Remember me? Yeah, I beat you, you wuss.
Yeah, I wouldn't get rid of that. Please remember that the reconnecting feature is there because some players have a worse connection, or, for example, they're commuting somewhere and connection drops for a little bit, and then the game tries to reconnect, and it tries a couple times before it is able to reconnect again, and that player is able to play. So that is kind of like a fail-safe, so you don't lose your progress pretty much when you're playing. But I feel like this is something that I've seen in other card games that I played. Like, even in Magic Arena, I've even had it, I don't know, yesterday. I was playing. I was obliterating my opponent. I'm playing with this new Rakdos artifacts deck in standard and arena, which is just making artifacts, sacrificing artifacts, and doing stuff off of that. And it's a very control-y deck with a crazy combo win condition, and which is just fun to play.
Is it Cauldron familiar?
No, it's more in a sense that you have this anvil, which I don't remember its name, but it's like whenever you sacrifice an artifact, it deals 1 damage to your opponent, and you gain 1 life. And whenever you also sacrifice an artifact, it also creates a 1/1 token that is an artifact, so you're able to, ping it almost every turn. And then like when you have also a lot of artifacts, you have like some like this vampire, which kind of, if you have a lot of blood tokens, gives like -X to your opponent's creature, twice the amount of blood tokens that you have, for example. So it's like, it's very control-y, but you're milling down your opponent's life very, very slow.
Chip damage.
But you also have like Obnixilis, which is a cool planeswalker from New Capenna, which I really enjoy. Because it lets you play 2 copies of the planeswalker if you sacrifice a creature, and you have like these small creatures and also the bigger ones, and then it creates a copy of the same planeswalker with a similar. So I play this planeswalker without going into all the details, and my opponent just disappeared, and I had to wait for. And there you need to wait for the rope to go down a couple times, like finish. And once your opponent, I think, doesn't do any action twice when the rope goes, it just automatically gives you the win. So you still need to wait. And there is no type of punishment, because sometimes it's just a matter of, I don't know, I'm guilty of this, but I play my card, but then I'm like, oh, I don't know, I forgot to take out my t-shirt from the laundry, or from like my biking stuff from the washing machine. I just jump next room, take it all out, come back, and I still have enough rope to kind of go back to playing. So, or I don't know, you're cooking something and you're like, oh man, I left something on the stove. You need to go and take care of that. And there's not going to be like no punishment. There should be like a camera, like, looking at you all the time. If you move your head away, then, the camera pretty much out of forfeit.
You know how many times I've played Apex Legends and I've tried to time the oven with a frozen pizza with like the matches? I'm like, I should be done this match by now. And then suddenly like the time, like the oven's beeping, and I'm in the middle of like a fight, and I'm like, I'm gonna burn my house down. And like my buddy's like, where do you go? And I'm just in a corner crouching as I'm ripping a pizza out of the oven so that my apartment doesn't burn down. There's like grenades flying over my head. I come back, both my freaking teammates are like knocked to the ground. I'm like, I'm back. What happened? They're like, you asshole. And I'm starting to res everybody and trying to figure stuff out. I'm like, poor timing on those, so I could totally relate.
But that's just life getting in the way, right?
Yeah, and I mean priorities. And again, I'm not a professional, so screw them. Yeah. The amount of times they've left me high and dry, screw them. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, all right. So TGG Gwent covered all of the normal drums that are beaten to death by now, so we're not doing. Yeah. Thank you so much for the question, though. That's we do appreciate them big time. There's a lot of actually cool ones that came in this week. So, all right, so we got a question from Zayad Tarek, aka at Zayad Neo. Always good for a good question. So thank you so much. You always submit some great stuff. The question here, Mr. Burza, is: after having finished almost all contracts, now I'm starting to aim for the top 500 to 200 contracts. Any general tips to help in climbing, regardless of the meta? Now, I can give you tips, and a lot of these are going to allude back to what we talked about in terms of proper deck building, but excluding meta analysis out of this, that's basically the majority of it, Zayad, is that if you need to have a finger on the pulse of what the meta is in order to attain those higher ranks. Top 500 is an exceptionally difficult thing to attain, because it's not like pro rank where there's no limit, there's no cap. Everybody who wants to and can get there will get there. But top 500 is an exclusive club, top 200 even more so. General tips, I would say, I mean, you can go from rank 25 to 15 purely off the merits of a good deck. You need like 5 good cards that you could typically get there. From 15 to 5, You need mastery of your deck. You don't necessarily need mastery of others. From 5 to Pro, I think is more so about a couple tech cards and understanding the meta, but everything beyond that is all meta analysis. So discounting meta as in terms of tips, I have to say that that is probably one of the most important things that you need to understand is how to pair up what you're going to be facing, understanding their win conditions and what they need to do, and then fixing your 3 to 5 flex slots in your deck to counteract those. Having the resets, the purifications you need, the graveyard hate that you potentially need, the extra removal spells to get rid of clutch engine pieces. If you do not have that, if you do not have a firm grip of what your opponent's trying to do, then you will not use your own cards in the most effective way. Patience is a virtue in terms of certain cards, and I've said this when I've played or helped coach other players. The first thing that they want to do when they see a big card is to snap off a heat wave. For instance, you win round 1, you're in round 2, they drop a scenario, you have a heat wave in hand. Are you heat waving the scenario? I typically say no, because this is a round that you don't need to win anyways, so why would you give up a good card to...
You can lose it, you can use at the end for something better.
Exactly.
Right?
So that would be my tip.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you. Like the higher you go, the more you need to know about the meta. Also, like general tips when it comes to climbing, I feel like if you feel that you are on a losing streak and you feel like you're in a rut, you should just take a break. Take a break, come back once you're fresh, eat something, drink something. Don't get into this mentality that you need to be grinding like crazy, especially when you're stuck in a rut, and we all get stuck. So go back, come back stronger. Like don't be pushing yourself all the time. But yeah, also like knowing the meta. I think also the things that we talked about today is kind of playing and changing things within your deck in order to fit where you are will kind of pretty much give you the win. And the higher you are, like Flake said, anything above rank 5, I think that's when the curve goes way up, and it gets a lot harder to use just your one strategy and try to win. Like try to play with a little bit of flex slots, change some things within the deck, and see how that goes from there. If you're on a losing streak, also don't worry about it. Just take a break, come back, and play more.
And you have to also understand that attaining 500, attaining top 500 is something that a lot of people are striving for. So everybody's out there trying to, fight for the same real estate. So you have to be prepared to lose. And sometimes it's part of, you might not be prepared today, but the journey of fighting for it, my best finish ever was 89th on the ladder. And I busted my ass off. So I think I had like 600 games that season. I was playing like 6 hours a day, just absolutely dedicated to it.
On the grind.
And for me, I had the opportunity to do it because streaming was part of what I did. Not everyone has that opportunity. So dedication, understanding of what it takes, and understanding also that you may not succeed on the first time, but you'll at least understand what it takes and how to adjust what you need to do. Because you can't play 4 or 5 games a day and get there. I'm sorry, that's just not the reality of it. You have to dedicate yourself to the fact that it's going to take time, it's going to take effort, and it's not going to be easy. So going through those trials and tribulations is a good thing, because it sort of thickens your skin. It creates like this armor for you, so that the next time you want to step into that, you get to pro rank the next season, and you're like, all right, I know what it takes now. I know that I'm not going to see the same 2 decks or 3 decks that I saw from rank 5 to 0 or 3 to 0. I'm going to see a lot more. So I have to be prepared. I have to expand my horizons. I have to pay more attention to what the hell is going on, because that one deck that you see, how many games, Pavel, have you played where they play like the first land they play, exactly what the deck is? And those are kinds of situations that you're going to come across where that one deck that you were not familiar with, if you're not paying attention and you let it beat you, the next time you play it, 8 or 9, 10 games down the road, where you're like, wow, here it is again. How did I lose that game? I wasn't paying attention. So that's part of it. And when Pavel says taking a break, part of the taking a break is not just to reset your mind, but it also allows for the cycle of the meta to start shifting as well. If you take the rest of the day off, you come back 12 hours later, the meta may have changed. It may no longer be a heavy control meta. It may be more of a hybrid. And if it's more of a hybrid, then you as a control player or an aggro player might have a little bit more of an advantage. So we'll see how that kind of goes. But yeah, those would be our tips, I guess.
Yeah, things change on the fly, and it's good that you mentioned that. Yeah, you might be coming back a little bit later, and it's something that I also talked about. Like different players play different decks at different times of the day, and you're also able to figure that out more or less, especially when you're playing Gwent. What's being played when, and you can also kind of play around this a little bit more. So yeah, for sure, and yeah, just take it easy. And I feel like don't try to like burn yourself out trying to go crazy and saying like I need to do it this month specifically. Like there's no problem of taking a little bit more time to get that done.
All right, next up, hit it.
Hello there, this is by Australia, Australia, I don't know, something like that. Hello there. Hope you're doing fine. Got a very specific question. How do you guys add so much incredible lore without betraying the universe depicted in the books? Do you have a team fully dedicated to it? And are there description and the cards written by the same guys who wrote the story, notes for reward trees? Excuse my bad English, French here. Oh, that's pretty good English.
No, that was excellent. First of all, merci beaucoup pour soumettre votre question. On va faire le meilleur possible.
Show off.
I'm not showing off. The dude speaks French, so we're gonna help him out.
French. Look at me. Okay. Yeah, we have a dedicated team that is responsible for lore consistency when it comes to everything happening in Gwent, happening in Witcher, happening in Cyberpunk. Like everybody here is and this dedicated team is responsible for these things. There are people in the CDPR studio who have such extensive knowledge of the universe that they can specifically by dates and like 12 something this and this happened and Redania something and they're like they tell you like very very specific things that I didn't even know that the lore was this like broad, but it's like pretty much you like learning history of the Witcher universe. So they have like very extensive knowledge, and you need to bear in mind that what was in the books and what is in the games, like we took our own spin here when it comes to what we're doing with the universe. And it's just a matter of keeping things very consistent of what we did, what was in the books, and how we kind of maneuver in between these things, not to do anything that is not too lore inaccurate. Of course, there are some things which are different from the books that are kind of our depiction of how we see the Witcher universe and stuff like that. But we try to be like fully consistent here, and we have a dedicated team that pretty much just is looking at these things. So yeah, and it comes to everything from art as to descriptions that are with cards, and also the story. That it pretty much doesn't go too crazy and far off. Of course, there's a lot of lore police within the Witcher / Gwent community, which is also keeping tabs on us and saying like, oh, this is kind of on the verge of being impossible, or on the verge of not being super accurate or stuff like that. I remember we had a community meeting a couple of years ago where there were people from the Witcher 3 community, and they came to our art director saying that Eridan's eye color was not the one matching with the books, because somewhere in the books it said that he had blue or green, and we either had blue or green. It was one of these colors. And the art director just simply, he's like, why did you guys do it? And he's like, because this eye color looked better. It suited us better. It was like, end of story. And the guy was like, what?
Well,
what? But it's not accurate with the lore.
I have to say, like, there's a lot of stories that are the source material versus the whatever is produced, there are people who are really care about it, and I mean, like, let's be real. I am definitely one of them. Not that I'm like, there's a scene from The Simpsons where the episode from The Simpsons where Homer becomes Poochie the dog, an extra character on Itchy and Scratchy. They do like a panel, like a fan panel, and one of the fans stands up, and it's one of the nerdy guys, and he's like, in episode 37 of such season, when when Itchy drops Scratchy in a barrel of acid and then proceeds to play his skeleton as a xylophone, he hits the same part of the ribcage twice, producing two completely different sounds. Now, are we supposed to believe that this is some sort of magic xylophone? I hope someone got fired for that. And then Homer's like, why don't you shut the hell up? It's like, it was basically that. Now, you have to find a fine balance between being true to the lore to the degree where it's actually important. Like, for example, having Chewbacca be from like, if Chewbacca was suddenly from another planet than Kashyyyk in one of the movies, that's what they drop, versus him in lore friendly, which is he's from the planet of Kashyyyk. If they make that change, that's a little bit more impactful. Eye color and such, I mean, unless it's integral to a certain plot point, like that to me is a little bit different. But I always appreciate it when people are very passionate about the source material to the degree where they want, they like the details. And some of the best stories I've ever heard were of people who are involved in the production of stuff that were very passionate about the source material and paid attention to those small details. For example, in Lord of the Rings, when Frodo wakes up in Rivendell in the bed and Sam goes to see him, you see Sam hold Frodo's hand, and part of that is because Ian McKellen, who is like a fan of the work and read the story, said in the book it says that Sam grabs Frodo's hand and holds it tightly or whatever, and Ian McKellen tells the actor, my God, I forgot his name, Samwise Gamgee. Oh my God, what's his name?
I know the guy.
This is gonna bother me. Either way,
that is Sean Astin.
Sean Astin. He tells Sean Astin to do that in the scene because he says fans will be looking for that. Like that's an important, and like that's a nice little tidbit. Eye color, I mean, it's tough because if it's integral to plotline or storyline or whatever, but these are kinds of details that I feel are okay to be different, but at the same time,
these are on elves. They need to have specific eye color. No, no. It's also for people who are who are listening, watching, and stuff like that. Like and it comes not only to Gwent but everything in life is like there is being passionate and there's being obsessed about things. Like, let's not get into like obsession that it all needs to be this way because it cannot be in any other way because the other way is not good. Although I'm very salty to Disney for changing the name of Boba Fett's ship from Slave 1 to Fire Spray. Because slave is just a bad word, I know, but I mean, that's the name of the ship. Like, don't change these things. Don't pull these things on me. This is lore. Don't change this.
I like how Boba Fett, who essentially did a lot of work on Tatooine being a planet that has rampant amounts of slavery on it.
Yes.
Anakin Skywalker was a slave.
Yes.
They mention that he was a slave. Meanwhile, a bounty hunter whose job it is to go out and like viciously capture and freeze people in carbonite for transport and sold to whoever the bounties are out on these people for, has a ship. Now, Fire Spray is the classification of the ship.
It's a class, yeah.
Yeah. But the name of the ship was the Slave One. And they axed that, and in my opinion, that is such a wuss-ass cop-out because there is so much absolute amounts of bullshittery and slavery that goes on Tatooine, and terrible things and murder and drug use.
But that's not being talked about, right?
And crime and the place is run by the Hutt crime syndicate. Like, oh, we can't call the ship the Slave One because like that, someone's gonna buy a Lego and be upset. Like literally they changed the name to sell merchandise, and that is an absolute terrible thing. But all right,
made me mad.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's not go too crazy about it.
Next question from Jack Flag on Reddit asking CDPR business ops question this time. Are the journeys considered as a successful revenue stream overall? Something you see as viable or even optimal for future offerings? Your thoughts as well on this, Flake. What are your thoughts overall on the current state of battle season passes in the general game marketplace? Too many offerings? Are they a healthy form of content development? Do they provide value? I'm interested in how they are viewed internally. I think this is an excellent question, Jack Flag, because I think between Pavel and I, we probably have extensive amounts of the old-fashioned grind of free-to-play grind versus pay-to-win grind, and now the introduction in the past couple of years of battle passes as places for value. So I'll let you start asking or answering the part about the journeys.
Mm-hmm. So journeys, yes, they are considered a very successful revenue stream, and I mean very. And I fully agree that for the future, of course, we're already working on new journeys because I like what they bring as in terms of a lot of new vanities attached to new characters, and for you having the ability to customize your character how you want to with these offerings. And totally 10 out of 10, this is something that I would recommend to everybody getting because it's just fun to progress. It's another progression system based to the normal one that you have, and it just gives you a lot more resources. And thanks to all this and the way that it functions, I feel like it's been something that for sure like is here to stay with Gwent.
No, and
so that's not part of the question.
I like the journeys, honestly. I think that these journeys are some of the best journeys, and I know people have put out value, evaluations of what they are. I know Christo used to do videos of them, very good videos about the values of the journeys, and from what I remember, I mean, even just in private discussions, the value was always significant, and I thought that they were definitely great. Not to mention, especially there were some where the cards that you were scoring from completing them were exquisite, and you're getting the amount of keys that you're getting. The value was way over the top. If you're just paying, $10 American or $15 Canadian or whatever it is to pick up one of the journeys, I always told people, I said, listen, it doesn't take a lot to complete it. If you play 3 or 4 matches a day, you're going to complete that journey no problem. Especially if you're focused on the quest aspect of it and creating and finishing those quests to get but it takes like 3 matches a day to really knock out these quests and get your money's worth. I think that journeys and battle passes in general, like to sort of switch over to the other part of the question, I think that they are very, very good for the game market. I am very much a fan of the fact that right now the monetization of games has switched from buying a physical copy of a game or buying the game itself and then playing it and waiting for new content to come out. I like the fact that games like Halo Infinite, games like Overwatch, games like Apex Legends, they're all free. I didn't pay a dime to these games. Halo Infinite, I've had hundreds of hours of fun playing that. Apex Legends, same thing. I bought the Apex Legends Battle Pass, and the reason, and here's why I think that why I am okay with Battle Passes, because if you're squeezing out more bang for your buck on them, that's a good thing. And why I think Apex Legends Battle Passes is one of the best is because if you buy it once and you complete it, it pays for itself. You get enough in-game credits and tokens that I think it costs something like 1,000 credits, but if you complete it, you earn 1,200 credits. So you can buy it and bank 200 and continuous that way. So I bought it once 5 or 6 seasons ago, and I've just been riding that train. So you can, the term is going infinite, which is usually a draft term, but there are also battle passes. For instance, the journey in Hearthstone, I would never touch with a 10-foot pole because the economy in general is incredibly predatory and terrible. Magic, same thing. I don't find there's too much value in it. There's too much. Well, I find that in my opinion,
I buy every season. I buy the mastery to get the mastery tree when you're playing the game. I know it's maybe not the best, but I feel like I don't remember the value. I think it's 19.99. I think it's almost 20 bucks for that one. I think you're able to get a lot of additional boosters, and even if you're not getting good stuff in those boosters, your opening boosters which later lets you craft more rares and mythics. So I still go for it. And I don't really care about the mastery tree and getting the little orbs, because you only get like
cosmetics.
cosmetics, which I don't really care about. I only buy cosmetics if they're on like a super sale that you can use your coins, or you can use like leftover gems to spend on those. But for the mastery, I feel like it's good because you're also able to accumulate additional gems from the mastery, which lets you later on buy the next mastery for less, or for free. So I totally I do it in Magic, but it requires you to really play a lot, and I mean a lot. You need to be pretty much grinding the game.
Yeah, and that's something that's not exactly easy.
And I
for a
agree
lot
with
of people.
you. If the battle pass is something that gives you some cool vanities and resources and doesn't give you too much of an edge on top of anyone else, if it doesn't influence gameplay in any way to a certain extent, I am totally fine with it. If it's a battle pass that is either supposed to be there to have you spend money and you're not really getting a lot from it, I feel like it's just like a pyramid scheme type of scam that's they're just trying to pull money out of you. So for those, I try to avoid totally. But if I see that I am able to actually get something out of these, I go for them. And of course, in Gwent, we're trying to be very generous. And I think it is always something that we had as CDPR as a company. Whenever we had any types of like boxed edition of The Witcher or any of the expansions, we would always give like soundtracks. We would like add a lot of additional content. So if you actually purchase something, you were feeling like you got your money's value out of what you got, instead of just getting a box with instructions and no like personal feel, touch, or anything else to it. So this is something that we've carried on throughout the years and also added to Gwent. To some extent, I almost think to our detriment at some point, because we've been sometimes too generous when it comes to Gwent's economy and kind of the providings that we had there. But I mean, you live and you learn.
Yep. No.
But doesn't mean that we'll be, taking stuff away and not having stuff that gives players a lot of cool stuff, but also enhances the gameplay experience because you're progressing something new, which always feels nice and rewarding. And journeys are here to stay.
And that's a good thing. Honestly, I'm such a fan of the shift from the monetization structure of what games are, because the amount of times I've bought a game and I'd be like, all right, and then it's either not supported 6 months later, like they just stopped because it was a failure, or the game ended up sucking. Like the fact that I play Halo Infinite and I'm like, God, like this is OP, or this needs balancing, or there's not enough maps, or they haven't introduced like standard casual Slayer or whatever. So what do? I just put it on the shelf and I'm like, I'll come back in 2 months to see if they've fixed things or whatever. And I don't feel bad because I haven't paid a dime to it. But if it's something that you play and you're like, wow, this is awesome, then you feel a lot better about dropping like $15 to $20 on a battle pass, because you're enjoying the game and you're enhancing that experience by unlocking a lot of things. Now, it's different with a shooter game, like an FPS, like Apex or whatever, because the stuff that you get is all cosmetic. There's not an ounce of it that is win more or pay to win in these games. Card games are different because you might be unlocking more cards or content, but that's just value that you can get. It's not like you're getting an advantage that other people can't get by using their in-game resources themselves. So I love this new model of how games are monetized. And I think, in my opinion, what it does is it puts the onus on the game company to create a better product to entice people to continue playing and then spending money on journeys and whatever. So I'm a huge fan of it, Jack Flag.
By Razor or Razor Italy, I don't know, maybe that's the one. This is going to sound strange, but why aren't there more cosmetics to purchase from the shop? Now more than ever, considering veteran players already have older journeys. Have you considered additional skins for existing characters or music packs I'm definitely not the only one willing to support the game, but there isn't really any way to do it.
Love this question. And
Yeah.
it's not a strange question at all, because it's important. And what I really appreciate is how players are very aware now that of the business element to a game, that you can't be overly like a company can't be overly generous, but they can't overly squeeze players of things. And players need to understand that the success of the game that they like is not necessarily just reliant on player base. There has to be revenue streams that are coming in, especially for card games that are free. You download it, you play it, you can progress freely. There needs to be some sort of way to, for players to entice players to open their wallets and give money so that the actual company can be profitable and continue to make the game. And that in my opinion is, if you're not putting out new cards, you need to put out vanities and stuff for people who have all the cards. How do you squeeze that out? I think that this is a very important concern, and I think the same way, because I tell people all the time, I'm not a bling player. I don't want my deck to be all foil. I don't need the coolest alternate arts of cards. I don't care about that. I just want a card that's legal to play in its cheapest form possible, and that's it. Funny story: one of a pro Flesh and Blood player really needed a card that was very, very rare, that was very popular and was hard to come by because it was super strong, and he found one in such ass condition. It was like bent in half. There was like a tear on it. But since it's
can still play it.
Yeah, since it's equipment, it starts on the board, so you don't have to shuffle it in. So there's no way to. So he paid like $40 for like a $250 card, and like when he'd show up to matches, I told him, I'm like, what would be hilarious? I'm like, put all your equipment on, and then pull out your wallet and pull out the folded card and put it on the board, and then keep score on it. Keep your score on it. I thought that would be great. But yeah, like for non-vanity players, like myself, there's very few parts that I would spend money for. But if they're like, I tell people, like, any Star Wars game that I play, if there's a Han Solo thing, I'm going to spend money to get that as a thing. For people who are as passionate about The Witcher as I am for Star Wars, if somebody sees like a Renfrey skin, let's say, obviously, or a Dagon skin, somebody might drop $10 because they really like the character and they want it there. And I am echoing the concern here of, there's not many ways for veterans to be like, CDPR, take my money, like just take my money.
I think it's this type of year pretty much, where we're kind of putting more vanity related stuff into journeys themselves. But I also know that we have a lot of things that is happening behind the scenes in terms of like new leader skins, and there's like leader skins that we want to add to the game, but we're kind of afraid of just having one type of leader without being him or her part of a journey coming into the game, because we kind of spoiled everybody with the, if you have a journey character, that character needs customization, and now we give you something that doesn't have customization, and then players will come in like, why doesn't this character have customization and that one has? Like, that's not fair. Like, I want this one to be also customizable. So we kind of got ourselves into this thing. But yeah, there is a lot of like new vanities that we're working on. The priority in terms of vanities still is us adding more vanities to the journeys which are making their return, for players to have the possibility to unlock new stuff, and also for players who haven't picked up the journeys to pick them up and get the old stuff plus the new stuff. So this is kind of where that is going. The only thing, of course, are the packs that contribute to anything that is esports related. Those are kind of happening. But apart from that, there are some things which we're working on, which hopefully will release soon.
Beautiful. Yep. Beautiful. Next question from Arvoimil. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it correctly, from Reddit. I love this question. We may have actually touched upon this once or twice, but I'm glad that it's here in officially. It says, if Gwent's standard format allowed mixing two factions, which combinations would play each other nicely? MTG's Color Pie and Gwent, if you will. Great question. And this was how old school Arena used to be, and this is why I much prefer old school Arena, because you are allowed to cross-pollinate, and that's where a lot of the experience of saying, like, what, this card and this card were great. Like, these two cards together were so cool. What two factions would fit nicely together. That's a tough one. I have my answer, but I want to hear yours first.
Nilfgaard and Northern Realm, so people can be pissed off that this shouldn't happen because they were in conflict.
So you're taking the Joker answer of you just want to see the world burn.
Yeah, I just want to see the world burn. But for me, I would like to play a mixture of Nilfgaard and Scoia'tael. That would be really cool. I feel like a nice control type of situation there. That would be cool. And also like monsters with a little bit of Skellige. That also would be nice.
That's my answer.
I would mix those up.
Monsters and Skellige is together. Like, you want to talk about Fat Boy Point Slam?
Yeah,
the hottest. Not only that, Death Wish and Self Wound together are like perfect together. My first thing that I fell on was Monsters and Nilfgaard, purple and red.
Okay.
No, sorry, Monsters and Skellige, purple and red.
Okay.
And like, you know how in Magic you have names for this? There's like Azorius, there's Simic, there's Dimir. I'm trying to figure out a cool name for purple and red, but that's in my opinion. The first thing I would dive into was a self-wounding Death Wish list, or
that would be awesome.
Fat Boy Thrive list. Oh my!
Fat Boy Thrive would totally work.
Fat Boy Thrive is like the other major hotness, but that is the number one thing that popped in my mind. And if that was ever a situation, if there was ever a mini game or a seasonal where it's like, yeah, you can mix two factions. Jump right on that one. That's where I feel, until somebody breaks it and figures out like one interaction that's just over the top. But that, to me, as a sustainable deck's theme or synergy, self-wounding Death Wish is the first thing I would touch on.
That would be amazing. Yeah, that was the combination that I was also thinking about. Like that would be so good, right?
Oh, like stick like a priest next to any Death Wish, so you're getting the value back. I mean, those interactions already exist, but within Skellige, but self wound and all that stuff. Oh, it's just so good, so
10
good.
out of 10.
All right, last one
by Phantom Mag. Once again, thank you for the question. A question to Burza, since he read the books. Haha. What character in the books that's not in Gwent yet you would like to see added one day? Flake can answer too, but not sure if he read the books.
I read one. I read the first one. Listen.
Renfrey. Where's Renfrey?
Where's Renfrey? Where's, you know what? The best in the book that I read, which is the one I think where he meets. It's the one with Adalia and like Princess and like is Regis in that one where he goes and like has dinner with Regis or something. It's like
aren't you talking about? Didn't you read like The Last Wish, which is the first one?
The Last Wish, yeah, that's the one that I read.
There's no Regis there. There's no Hansa there yet. He meets what's his name?
There's the prince, like the one who looks like a cactus.
A beast.
Yeah.
Yes. Jesus, this was even in the Netflix series.
It was in that book.
I have the name, but I need to remember it.
In that book, there was one character that I was like, I would love to see this in as a card. It was my God, it was the chapter. Premium Token. That was the guy. That was the dude I would love to see, is Mr. Premium Tokens. I would love to have him in the game. I think that's what I would like to see it in it the most.
I can't. Jesus, now it's gonna haunt me because I have the name on the tip of my tongue, but I can't freaking...
Sean Astin.
No. Nivellen.
I mean, once. Yeah,
Nivellen.
He's but Nivellen is a card already.
Yeah, he is.
Do you want another one?
I'm just saying, because you said that's the book you read, and then you got me on the train of who's the beast.
Oh, is in it, right? Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed the book. The problem is that I have so many books that I like that I still have left to read. I'm very ambitious when it comes to if I see a book that I want and it's like on sale or I can get it super cheap. I buy all my books from like a place called thriftbooks.com where you can get like hardcovers for like $3, and they ship them, and The conditions are usually good. They're usually old books from libraries that they need to like cycle, so they sell them off for super cheap, and I pick them up. But the amount I'm so into Star Wars over that I like to read canon Star Wars books that are canon to just kind of flesh out, because you never know when a random character appears in a show or this or that, and that's usually where I go. But like
yeah, I know that. I know that.
Because from this book and this book and this book and this book, I was like, oh, okay, I got it. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. But I like the books. I do. I'm not. I don't think there's any character out of them that I would that really stuck with me that is not already in the game. So
that's also how I feel. But probably there is something that I'm missing. But
Renfrey.
It's been some time since I read the books. But yeah, Renfrey for sure.
Let's get Renfrey in the game, and give Dr. Crotchet
rest. Time to rest.
Time to rest, buddy. And then hopefully no one else does this kind of hunger strike thing.
There'll be a next one.
Oh, of course there will. Sure. It's going to be premium tokens. Here's a fresh card for premium tokens until the end of time.
Or for Dagon. Yeah.
Whatever. Do what you got to do.
Let's not give them ideas.
No, that's what's going to happen. I was actually going to what I was thinking about doing was I wanted to say custom card every day until
Pofko gets a rework.
Until something. And what I was going to do was I was going to take designs of cards that had already existed, that had already been reworked and changed, like all the way from beta and stuff like that.
Ooh.
And just to see how people think.
You like to see the world burn.
I do. I wanted to take cards that have already existed and then have people call them terrible or OP or whatever, and a bad design or whatever. I'm like, okay.
By the way, they used to be in the game.
Yeah, these all existed, by the way. The problem is I looked for a database of old cards and it wasn't reliable to find. So if anybody's out there listening and has an actual database of every card and its progression, that would be wicked cool. But
I think if I dig up my old emails, even I remember I was sending like exports of old card abilities to some people, like in beta times for like a website that they were creating. So for sure, I could probably pull like the old ones for you.
Those would be so funny. But that was the plan that I wanted to do. I wanted to do like a solid 30 days in a row of like design or reworking cards too, and then just show people like what old cards used to be like and whatnot.
There you go.
Man, one of the things that I missed the most was, do you remember in old beta, old Solano Harpy used to be like a 5-drop that used to spawn 2 eggs, and if the eggs hatched, they'd spawn like 5 drops or 3 drops. The Death Wish was like spawn a Harpy, and it was like a 5. It was like a 4 strength unit, and there was also a card that said like consume all one strength creatures on the board, which is now Glusty Warp, but it used to exist. Like you used to be able to eat everything on the board, create like a bajillion points. Not only that, the other thing was old school Triss Butterfly, which used to buff all the lowest units by 1. So if there's 1s on the board, they become 2s, then all the 2s become 3s. And you load up the board with like all these...
That was crazy with monsters back in the day.
Oh, it was great. You jammed all these little eggs that nobody wanted to pop, because if they did, it was negative value. And then you drop Triss Butterfly on the board, and then she just boosts everything up, and then they're like, oh no! And from round to round, all those eggs would pop, so you'd have like 15 points of carryover for free. So it was some psychotic stuff back in the day. Never take me back, but
good times, but crazy times.
Crazy times. Pavel, it's been a pleasure. What a great episode.
As always, man. Exactly.
When I come visit, we're not biking to Gdańsk. Well, we'll take
we'll take a train.
Yeah, we'll take the train, and we can sit next to each other, hold hands, and eat punchki together.
We can play Flesh and Blood because they have these little tables that you can play on.
Oh, perfect. I have a gigantic box of cards to bring with me when I come visit. Nice. A lot of bulk from a lot of sets to help you out in your Flesh and Blood journey. Because I promise you, once you get past the surface level and you start peeling layers back, you're like, damn, this is a deep ass game.
Same with any card game that you get into. If you I always have this like. It's like jumping into a pool on a hot summer day. You know it's freaking deep, but you want to jump into that cool water. And it's like when you take the leap of faith and when you jump in, it just feels so good.
It feels so
just
good.
feels so good.
Once you get past that shock of like, oh my god, you're like, well, this is freaking
Yeah.
nice. Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I the first time I played Gwent for a few hours, and the first time, and then I uninstalled it, and I had no interest. And then it was McBeard who said, give it another try. And I was like, all right. I'm like, it seems pretty dumb to me. It seems pretty basic. And then as I started to unlock, I'm like, oh, I unlocked this card. This card's fascinating, and boom, 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 and 10,000 gameplay hours later, here I am being like, okay, yeah, it's a pretty good game. Not gonna lie. Okay, that is an episode, my friend. As always, we're gonna end this the way I ended always time. I love you, Pavel.
I love you too, man.
Good, as you should. I love you. All right,
Exactly.
so friends, thank you so much for listening to the Flurza Experience, a show about card games. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out and send them our way.
Same goes for topics. If you have a topic idea, fire it at our way. We're more than happy to get some stuff. We have a lot of our own ideas, but if there is something that piques your interest, let us know.
Definitely. So thank you so much. And friends, don't forget, you're not losing if you're learning. Keep playing the game. We will catch you next week on the Flurza Experience.
Exactly. Bye.